Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN AM for Tuesday, October 8th, 2019. And here are your top stories. Avoiding overcharges and fees on your telecom and cable bills. And Roku, Amazon. Where do you go to pick a streaming service? And where do you start? Well, many Americans have access to cell phones, they stream, and they also have cable. But did you know that Consumer Reports now estimates that over $450 is spent annually by each individual on their cable bill? You should really understand your cable bill, what that means, and how to avoid these overcharges. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more, Senior Technology and Consumer Products Reporter Daniel Kline from the Motley. Hi, Daniel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Happy New Year, Jeff.
Happy Lashana Tova to you, my friend. Looks like you are back at home base. No trips this week?
I am home for almost 3 weeks, so right at the edge of tolerance for where my wife would kind of want me to take a trip.
Well, good for you. I'm so glad you could join us. Well, Dan, you heard my headlines, top stories at the top of the segment, and obviously there's a lot to be said for carrier fees, knowing your fees for both phone devices but also cable devices. What do you have to say on this matter?
So a lot of times the advertised price for subscription-based services, things like phone bills or cable or internet service, are not what they're advertised. And frankly, in my opinion, I don't think that should be legal. I think if you have to have something in order to get that base fee to work, then it's very important that they tell you that. But most companies don't. So it might be a deal, 4 phones for $40 each, so it's $160. But there might be a fee for paying your bill digitally. There might be a fee for, usually you get a deal for paying your bill digitally.
Right.
There might be a fee for activation. There might be a monthly fee that just says carrier fee. So what you need to do with each and every bill you pay is look at it carefully. Go by it line by line. So one of the big examples is when you get cable, you pay for the cable box. And in some cases, you pay for every cable box you have. So maybe you would decide, geez, I don't watch TV that much in this room. I'm not going to get a cable box for it.
Right.
Because I can move the one here for the once or twice a year I do it. When you get an internet service, in many cases, they rent you a modem that you could buy. And they don't go out of their way to tell you that there are $69 modems that they're charging you $8 to $12 a month for, or frankly, that they could sell it to you for maybe $150 or something like that. So you really have to look at your bill and be kind of a pain in the ass. Call them up and say, look, what is this extra usage fee? I joked once, and I think we've had this discussion, on a mortgage, I once paid a fee marked miscellaneous fee. And for a mortgage, you don't have a lot of leverage or a lot of choice.
Yeah, most of us are on fixed budgets. We are spending our money for food, rent. We don't have that discretionary money or savings, I should say, because that's very important, the purpose of the show. But, there are a lot of things that when you're a consumer, you should be aware of. And Dan, looking at where these costs are, I'm assuming that it's pretty simple to do. You just have to download a copy of the statement, just like you would your bank statement, just like you would when you're, looking at your car loan or any other big ticket item. You want to do that, right? And then you have that information, and you can now potentially compare and contrast with other services.
Yeah, in most cases, all you have to do is either, sometimes they just send it to you in an email, but you're only looking at the top line number.
Right.
Some cases you have to go into your account, and once you get there, it's not overly confusing. And you might call, and ask your phone company, what's this fee? And they'll say, yeah, you live in New York City. There's an extra 0.25% tax. You have to pay that. But it's important to know what that is, especially because when you move out of New York City, they might still charge you that. And if you don't know you're paying it in the first place, you won't know to ask to get it removed. The other thing you can do is leverage services against each other. There are 4 major phone carriers and many minor ones. So if you look at your phone bill and think it's too high, call up the phone company and tell them, here's what I could get from T-Mobile. Here's what I could get from one of the lesser carriers, and see what they'll do. In many cases, the phone companies won't do that much. The cable companies, because they're experiencing such a shrinkage of their industry, they're very likely to come back and offer you some free things. So maybe they'll give you HBO or other channels you don't have, and maybe you wanted those and didn't have them for financial reasons. The important thing there, though, is to remember that if they give them to you for a period, mark what that period is. is and when it ends, go through the whole process again. You have to be active in all your services. And the good news is it's pretty easy to cut the cord. It's pretty easy to switch cable providers if you live someplace that has multiple. Phones are largely portable. iPhones can move between any systems now. So know your bill, be an advocate for yourself, and realize that, hey, it might only be $5, but $5 a month over 20 years is a significant piece of savings if you can throw that into an investment account or a retirement account.
You know, it's interesting. In the retirement industry, you know this, we advocate for at least looking at your portfolio once a year to make sure that it is in line with your goals and objectives. Or more frequently, if your life is changing, you get married, you have a death in the family, whatever, you need money, loans, etc. The same should be true for virtually every service, right? You know, people like, we are creatures who do not necessarily like change. And that can also create indecisiveness and the inability to shop around.
Absolutely. And in a lot of cases, if we like our cable company or the package of channels we have, we won't notice that our bill has creeped up. And sometimes you might log onto their website and see that there's a promotion that's better than what you have for less money. And you're out of contract, so you could quote quit and then sign up for that new promotion. With some of the phone companies, they give you free services. T-Mobile gives you Netflix. They don't pay the price increase, so you still pay a couple dollars, but they pay like 11 of the $13. But you have to opt in to that promotion, meaning you saw the ad and just assume Netflix is paying for your, T-Mobile's paying for your Netflix. They would have no way to know you even have Netflix if you don't go in your account and connect the two. So you really have to watch the ads, look at what's out there, and ask for what I'm entitled to. It's okay to call your cable company that's also your internet provider and say, I'm spending this much, I want to spend less. There's other providers, at least for television. You can always cut the cord and go digital streaming. What can you do for me? And they might come back to you with an offer that has less stuff, and you might look and see that the stuff you lost isn't things that matter, or maybe you save $30 and it's going to cost you $5 to get something you mattered in a streaming way. And that can be done. So it's not that hard, older members of my family use streaming services to supplement regular packages or have switched providers. So this is not something for the, just the super technical. This is something for everybody.
And just one last point, and I want to get your take on this. You mentioned the mega providers, the big four, I think you said, and then the smaller providers. Are there differences there in terms of the coverage? Do some of the smaller platforms lease some of the other towers? How does that work?
If you're going to go with, a lesser smartphone company, cell phone company that doesn't have its own network, what you need to do is look and see whose network they're leasing. So if you have Verizon and you switch to a cheaper provider that's on the Verizon network, that's going to be better. Mm-hmm. The reality is where most of those cheaper carriers skimp is customer service. Yeah. So if you're not someone who's comfortable getting your own phone up, doing some of that yourself, be very, very careful and maybe go to one of the lesser brands owned by a major carrier. So, there's two types of smartphone contracts. There's prepaid, that's where you pay in advance for the month you're getting, and postpaid, where you have a contract and you pay after the fact. The prepaid ones are cheaper, and all of the major carriers have prepaid brands. So if you like Verizon or you like Sprint and you want to save a few dollars, you might switch to the ones they own because you can still get customer service in their stores or through their systems.
And also, don't forget data. Some people allow you to roll data that you don't use. Some people charge you higher rates if you use certain amounts of data. We still have, my wife and I still have a data plan, so we get 24 gigabytes a month. Anything over that we pay. A lot of times, if you go unlimited, they may truncate or shorten your usage as you tend to use up more over time. Dan, I want to hold you for another segment. And when we come back, we're going to talk to Dan about some of these streaming platforms, Roku, Hulu, Amazon. He knows them better than I do. So stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network. Welcome back. You know, many Americans now have cut the cord or are thinking about cutting the cord, but what does that really entail? And what is a streaming service like Amazon or Roku or Hulu? What does that mean? Well, Dan Kline is sticking around with us to discuss this. Dan, thanks so much for staying with us. And this is really in your wheelhouse. I mean, you do this stuff all day long. So we already covered the carriers. But now let's talk about some of these streaming services. How do I choose what I want? What works?
It's a challenge as a consumer. So the first thing you have to do is figure out what device you're going to use to get streaming networks, unless you're watching everything on a computer or a phone or a tablet, but assuming you want these things on your TV, you have a few different choices. At the lower end of the price field, and honestly, I don't think you need to go above the lower end unless you want a video game player that happens to also do streaming. But there's Roku, and you can buy a Roku for maybe $29, certainly under $40. And then there's Amazon, which has a variety of Amazon Fire streaming products. And these are basically little devices. They look like, maybe like USB drives or a Joule to be to talk in the modern vernacular. They're pretty small. They plug into your TV. You plug your cable line, or your internet line into it. And that brings you the ability to bring in streaming networks. So there's a little bit of setup through your computer, and they both work about the same, whether it's Roku or Amazon or even at the higher end Apple TV. So you get to them, and they have a few things that are native. So Roku has some native channels, some native content, same thing with Amazon. Mm-hmm. But mostly, that's where you decide, okay, I pay for Netflix, or I want to sign up for Netflix. So I'm going to download the Netflix app, and it's very simple. There's little marketplaces, looks like, the store on your phone. You pick the apps you want. You might find like, wow, there's a whole bunch of free apps, like Crackle from Sony has a bunch of weird content that's free. So you don't have to pay for it. You can just sign up and get it. There's all sorts of stuff like that. Maybe this show will be on Roku soon enough.
We can only hope.
So what you do, and then once you have it, you have to figure out what you're willing to spend. So Netflix is, $12.99 a month. Hulu, which you mentioned, is much cheaper, and soon Hulu is going to be bundled with Disney Plus, which is going to have Star Wars and Marvel and all the Disney kids content, and ESPN Plus, which has a lot of boxing and mixed martial arts and things like you get Chris Berman doing NFL Primetime that doesn't air on the actual ESPN network. So some really cool stuff. That's only going to be in that same $11.99, $12.99 price range, though they haven't said how long they'll keep that price for. So you have to set your budget and then figure out what you want. In my house, because of what I do for a living, we have all of them. Pretty much every service you could buy, I have 90% of them at any given time. And if you get rid of cable, then you could decide, well, do I want a live streaming service? So you could get something like Sling TV or Hulu Live, which actually have packages of live television channels, and in some cases have local television channels. And This all seems very confusing because in some ways it is. There is no good interface where you can say, I just want to flip around through everything and have Netflix be there. Cable does that in some markets, where Netflix is actually just a channel on your cable dial, where if you're a subscriber, you can access it, sort of like HBO. But on a Roku or an Amazon platform or an Apple platform or Xbox or Sony or any of them, it is sort of like apps, where if you want to pay for CBS All Access, you have to bring that up separately from Sling TV or Hulu.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I went, disconnecting. I went cutting the cord. I cut the cord. My wife and I cut the cord two years ago. We had a major carrier. We were paying close to $200. We did not. So that was for internet, and that was also for television. Now, for television, we don't buy any of the HBOs or Showtimes because we don't watch that much TV. So what I decided to do, with my wife's approval, of course, happy anniversary, honey, is to cut the cord, get the internet from the carrier, and then solicit some of these devices. So I originally tried Amazon Fire, played with that for a while. We signed up for, Sling TV because, we also tried out Hulu TV. So by the end of the day, we were actually able to reduce our bill from about $200 and some odd down to about $150. And look, that's $50 in our pocket. Maybe we go out to dinner once a week together. Maybe I can send her flowers. Maybe we can save it. But I think it's just a matter of, I was originally nervous. How was I going to operate? It's kind of the wild, wild west.
So we had sort of a different experience. We cut the cord because we pay for Sling TV to use at our second home. We don't pay for cable there, just internet. Sling TV gives you a pretty good selection of live stuff, some sports, like you might get the baseball playoffs on TBS. So it was a pretty good selection. But we cut the cord here and switched to Hulu TV or Hulu Live because they had access to our local channels, thinking that we'd be able to just use that instead of Sling TV at our other home. And then we realized because it has local channels, you're not allowed to bounce it back between different TVs.
Right.
So that didn't work for us. The other thing that didn't work for us was the DVR had a lot of restrictions where you could fast forward through the content and a lot of things, but not the commercials. And we watch a lot of things on DVR. Plus, there are three of us. It's my wife, my son, who's 15, and myself. And we all watch different things. So in cutting the cord, we were making sacrifice. Each one of us was sacrificing things we want. And in some cases, we were sacrificing things we watch together. So for us, because we do, at least my wife and I watch a fair amount of television or have television on in the background while we're working, saving that $50 wasn't worth it because we would have spent that money on other forms of entertainment, whether that be renting movies or going out. So you really need to look at your system. If I was just me, I would do fine with Sling TV and a couple of streaming services, but add in two other people and it becomes a little complicated because if I can't just get the package I want, that would not go over well.
Well, I think it's just a matter of, I think what we talked about in the first segment and kind of tying off this second segment is, know what you have, know what you're paying, and then ultimately it's almost like saving for retirement. You got to know what your future budget's going to be. What are the things that you want, don't want? Do you want to go on vacation once a year? When it comes to picking a provider or not using a cable provider, what are the things you're going to use? How many people in your family? And it's not only a me decision, it's me and my wife, or you and your wife and family to decide what makes sense. And I think then you can figure out what the best path is forward. Because the reality in this new cord cutting world is if you don't like Roku, you can go in a different direction. If you don't like Hulu, you can go in a different direction. There's YouTube TV. There's so many. I think it's worth the exploration. And Dan, I think you did a wonderful job kind of breaking it down for people. Hopefully it's, I wouldn't say this is the buyer's guide, but I think it was really things you need to think about.
I'll share one more quick tip. The other thing that's different between these services and cable is in most cases, you're buying them month to month, meaning if you get Netflix, watch everything you want to watch on Netflix, you can then shut off Netflix until you need it again. So some services, Netflix has an endless amount of stuff, so we don't turn that one off. But other services, you might only have one or two shows you want to watch. Buy it for a month, focus on that show. Frankly, they'll usually charge you for a fraction of a month.
Yeah.
So be really careful in terms of how you do things. Don't let them languish. Tell your kid, yes, I'll get you this, but you have to watch those shows in the next 60 days because then it's going away.
Yeah, real smart. Dan Kline, always a pleasure to talk to you on this Technology Tuesday. I learned a lot. I hope the audience does as well. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you on the podcast a bit later.
Thanks, Jeff.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Hey, have a financial topic or someone of interest you think we should interview? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for more news in retirement technology, personal finance, and more, check out today's edition of The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Waiting here for you to take and drink of. But if you're tired of the same